There's nothing wrong with buying seedlings from a greenhouse, but if you want a wider variety of plants to choose from, then seed is the way to go. And if you're growing plants that you want to grow organically or for pollinators, then growing your own means that you can guarantee that they're organic or untreated, because not all plants from garden centers and greenhouses are untreated. So it's important to know what's on your plants and where they came from. If you knew that you could grow any color or shape or size of a plant that's available through seed, why would you not want to grow from seed? So today's video is all about common questions from people who are new to growing seeds, and I'm also going to take you through how to read a seed packet, because there's a lot of useful information on these little packages and it's important to be able to read them properly so that way you buy the right kind. What is up? My name is Bree from Urban Gardening Canada and I garden in Ottawa Zone 5. Today I wanted to first take you through how to read a seed packet and look for the important pieces of it, and then after that I'm going to get into a little bit of a Q&A. I'm going to answer 15 really common questions that people have about growing from seed or seeds themselves, and I'm going to put timestamps in this video so that way you can jump to what's most important to you. Maybe you already know how to read a seed packet but you have some questions, and so I am going to put those timestamps below for you to click on and you can hop to where it's important to you. Okay, so I am using a seed packet from West Coast Seeds. It's a Canadian brand, and I actually really think that they do a good job on their seed packets, which is why I want to use them as an example. And there's 6 things that I'm going to take you through specifically on it, and the first one is about the picture and the description on it. And so what I love about West Coast Seeds is that they use an actual picture on it, or have one at all. Some seed companies don't put any pictures on their packages, or they use drawings. And I know some people like the artistic side of those, but for me personally, I really love having an actual picture on here to know what the plant is supposed to look like. And of course it comes with the type of plant that it is and the variety. So this is a tiara cabbage. And then it gives you a description on the bottom here, and so this tells you exactly what you're buying, and then tells me how big it should be, 1 to 2 pound heads, because this to me is really important for knowing how much space they need, and when I can determine if it's ready to be harvested. I know if it's supposed to be 1 to 2 pounds, it gives me an idea of how big it should be. And then the next part on here is the timing of it, and so this tells me 60 days. So this is the days to maturity. So days to maturity only counts on when it's been planted out. So whether you sow seeds outside or you put a seedling outside, that's considered day 1. And so the days to maturity on this is 60 days. So if I plant this out on April 1st, then by May 30th, I'll be able to harvest this, or it should be around that time. So I know by the end of May would be the time that I should be keeping an eye on if these should be harvested. Another item to note on here is, especially with West Coast Seeds, after the days to maturity, they often have an F number or OP at the end of it. So OP stands for open pollinated, but in this case, this is an F1. Normally, I am not a fan of buying hybrid seeds, and that is what the F signals, is the number of years that this has been hybridized. And so this is a first year hybrid with the F1. And the reason that I don't like to have hybrid seeds is because it requires a lot of hands-on time in order to hybridize these seeds, but I can't save seeds from it. And the reason that I chose to go with a hybrid for cabbage was twofold. Number one, I'm not going to be saving seeds from this cabbage. I plan on harvesting all of them that I grow, and so I'm not worried about seed saving from this. And the second was that I was putting priority on trying to find organic seeds on their website, and this was, I think, the only organic cabbage that they had offered, because I try and make a choice on what is better on the planet or better on people, and I believe that choosing organic seeds is more important than the hybrid portion of it in this specific case, and so that's why I chose to get a hybrid plant because I really wanted to get organic seeds. So I want to know, what are you planning to grow from seed this year? Are you starting something new? Are you new to seed starting? And what are you the most excited to be trying? If you just wanted to drop it in the comments below, and then we'll get back into the video. So the next section down here is talking about the germination rate. It also has the year it was packaged and how many seeds are in it. And so this is important. One, I like to know how many seeds are in it because of the price. And I will admit these are really expensive. These seeds are $5 for 25 seeds, and part of that is the hybridization, but seeds have gotten really expensive this year. It seems that the prices have gone up and the seed quantity has gone down. Although for me, 25 seeds is okay. I'm only gonna grow maybe 10 this year. I think I've planted 9 already so far. And so this will only last me a couple years. In the past, I've been able to buy cabbage seed packages that have 100 seeds in them, and I just never run out. And that's good, but if I ever want to try another variety, then I'm just left with a ton of seeds. And so 25 to me is low. I wish there was about 50 seeds in here, especially for the price of $5 Canadian, but 25 isn't too bad. It says it was packed for 2025. It doesn't mean that these seeds were grown in 2024, it just says packed for 2025, but at least you have an idea when you save onto these seed packages in 2-3 years from now, you know how old the seeds approximately are. And then the germination on this, it says germ 97%, and that means that they've tested the germination rate on these seeds, and of all of the seeds they planted, 97% of them will germinate. And so the germination rate is really important because you want to know how good it is, so that way when you do plant a bunch of seeds at home, you should expect a similar germination rate. So if you plant 10 seeds and only 5 of them germinate, then you know that maybe there were some issues with your soil or your watering. And if none of them germinate, then you know that there was another type of issue, whether it's actually the seeds or how you've been growing them. And so for me, I use this to know that if generally at 97%, I get about 100% germination rate. So if these are supposed to germinate in 7 to 10 days, which we'll look at in the back in a second, I should expect in 7 to 10 days that 97% of my seeds germinated. And if they didn't, I know that something went wrong and I need to plant my seeds again. So it's very important to compare those two, so that way if your seeds aren't germinating properly or at all, that you know to replant them. So the germination rate is part of the seed specs. And if I look on the back here, it says seed specs, Canada #1, germination rate 80%, usual seed life 3 years. The usual seed life is really helpful for you to know that you can keep these for up to 3 years, and from there the germination rate will start to decline. But I'm not even sure anyone could survive with 25 seeds in 3 years. If you have a larger garden, you'll use these up long before 3 years happen. All right, so this is one of the things that I really like about West Coast Seeds, is that they do a really good job of writing on the back of their seed packets. And so we've already covered 3 of the 6. And so the last 3 are timing, seeding, and growing. And so the timing on here is really great. For early and main season varieties, start indoors 4 to 5 weeks before transplanting or direct seed after danger of frost. And of course, because they don't know where you're planting, they're not going to say exactly when to start it. So you need to know when your last frost date is and then work the 4 to 5 weeks before that. The next is seeding, and this is specifically to tell you how to plant your seeds, which is really important. And so it says to sow the seeds 1/4 inch deep in sterile seed starting mix. And I have done a video on how to make your own peat-free seed starting mix, so I'll link that below for you guys, because I definitely think you'll want to check that out and make your own seed starting mix to be better on the planet and to also save money. And then it tells you once they've gotten large, you're going to transplant them 12 inches apart from each other in rows that are 18 inches apart. And so the final section of this is growing, and so it tells you how to grow your plant once it's out in the garden. So it says this cabbage plant prefers well-drained fertile soil with lots of organic matter, and to also cover it with row cover if you need to prevent damage from insects. And I also have a video on how to use insect netting. I highly recommend using that if you're planting these by themselves. or if you're planting them with anything else that doesn't need pollination like onions or garlic. And that is really helpful information. I think that they do a really good job with their seed packets in comparison to other companies that sometimes don't have pictures, or they don't tell you how to plant them out or how to care for them once they are out. Not all seed packages are alike, and so it's really important to understand the 6 different things that you need to know in order to plant your seeds properly. So the one thing that I mentioned earlier but haven't seen on this seed package is it doesn't tell you how long the seeds will take to germinate. So nowhere in the timing does it say that they should germinate within 7 to 10 days or 2 weeks or 3 days. There's nothing on here for that. And I think that that piece of information is really important, because if you have sown them and it's been 2 weeks from now and you haven't seen anything, you need to be able to know, like, it should have come up 7 days ago, it's not here, I need to replant the seeds. And so this would be something that I would suggest you would Google. It doesn't necessarily have to be the tiara, but you would look up something along the lines of how fast should cabbage seeds germinate, because you really want to know this stuff to know if you need to do a second sowing. And so I would say that is one miss that this West Coast seed packet is missing that they should really be including. So I have a square foot garden planner on my website. It's an interactive tool, and it is really beneficial for knowing how many cabbage seeds to be planting or whatever else you're planting. I'll put a little blurb thing up on the screen here so you can see it. And what you do is you pick out the plants that you want to be growing this year, and it will tell you how many can fit in a single square foot. If you are a fan of square foot gardening, you'll love this. And if you don't do it yet, you should get into it. It's amazing. For example, a cabbage, there would only be 1 per square foot. And so this tool, you can use a drop down and pick whatever vegetables you want. It'll tell you how many can fit. And on the right side, it actually builds a list that has for either buying seeds or how many seedlings you need to be buying. And so you can take this list with you in order to buy your seed packages, plant your seeds, or buy your seedlings. And so I will leave it in the link below. And if I didn't mention it, it's free for you to grab. And so I really recommend using that to help you plan your garden this year. Okay, so let's get into some common questions that people have about growing from seed. Okay, so the first question is, how do I know when to plant my seeds? And so this question is a little difficult to answer because of course every seed is sown at a different time and it's different depending on where you live. But I would recommend reading your seed package because it will tell you. Again, this cabbage one said sow it indoors 4 to 5 weeks before transplanting. And oftentimes people are transplanting on their last frost date. So you're gonna wanna Google your city's last frost date and then count 4 to 5 weeks behind it. And that is how you know when to plant your seeds. If you're new to seed starting, just stick with your last frost date and work that way until you can experiment with better times that work for you. But consult your seed package and the last frost date of your city to determine when to be sowing your seeds. There's also a ton of really good planting guides, seed starting guides out there. So you might be able to look up your city name and a seed planting guide, and there might be a gardener in your area who's created something like that worth downloading. So that's another option that you have too. The second question is, what does days to maturity mean on a seed packet? I went through that earlier in this video, and that means how many days it takes from when you planted your plant outdoors to being able to harvest it. So even though I'm gonna start my cabbage seeds now, I'm not harvesting 60 days from today. I'm harvesting 60 days from the minute I've planted it outside in my garden. So days to maturity means from the minute you planted that bean seed into your soil outdoors to being able to harvest your first bean off the plant. All right, the third question is, how deep should I plant my seeds? So every seed is different. There are a few exceptions. It always works that way. Some seeds need darkness to germinate, others need light to germinate, but a lot of them follow the same rule, and that rule is to plant it at twice the depth of the seed. And I hate this description because it's like listening to calculus for me. And just to be clear, I'm a finance major, and so I'm good with numbers, and yet this trips me up all the time. So the theory is that unless it needs light to germinate or darkness and you have to do a gentle sowing on top of it. If your seed is a centimeter in size, you want to plant it 2 centimeters down below. So it's twice the depth of the size of the seed. And so although this doesn't work for all seeds, and your seed package will clarify if it requires light to germinate, such as lettuce seeds, otherwise you can follow the rule of twice the depth of the size of the seed. Okay, so the fourth question is, do all seed packets come with the same information? And again, I touched on this earlier. The answer to that is no. And I will show you. Okay, so I have 2 packets of seed here. One is from William Dam Seeds. This is in Ontario, and then again, my West Coast seed one. And so this seed packet looks a little different. It gives you a picture and the name of it and the size. And on the back, instead of having written instructions, it does a really quick and dirty list here of what you need. And so it's a plant type is an annual. You sow it indoors. It germinates in 7 to 12 days. This is important information. It tells you the soil temperature. And actually, I think that the West Coast seed missed that as well. So this one tells you the optimal soil temperature for when you're planting your seeds. And so this one likes 21 degrees Celsius, which means putting it on a heat mat is going to help with seed germination. Seed depth, plant space, flowering time, 16 to 18 weeks from seeding, which is why I've started my carnations already. And the frost tolerance is strong, which is true. And that is why if you missed my last video on seeds to be planting in January, you won't have known that I said carnations were on that list. And part of the reason that it's on there is because of how good they are with their frost tolerance. So you can get these out early. And so this one is another really good example. However, there are seed packets out there that don't come with pictures or don't come with a lot of the information, and you're stuck Googling to know how to plant them properly, which you only can successfully do if you understand the 6 sections of a seed packet that you need to have. Our next question is, what do terms like germination rate and seed specs mean? So germination rate is how many of the seeds that you planted are going to germinate. If it's 75%, that means 3 out of 4 of your seeds will germinate or more if you're lucky. But if you have a 75% germination rate and only 1 out of your 4 seeds has germinated, it means that you need to check your inputs because there's something wrong. And seed specs is all part of that on a seed packet. It's just some of the language that some of these seed companies use, which includes when they were packaged, how long the lifespan of the seed is, and what the germination rate is. The next question is, how do I store leftover seeds for next season? So seeds don't want to be in the sunshine. They don't want to be in high heat. So you can store them in a freezer, you can store them in a fridge, or you can just store them in a cool, dark, dry place. I try and make sure that I don't keep my seed packages outside too long in the summer sun when I'm sowing outside, and that I keep them in my house in a dark closet over the rest of the season. But also it depends. Seeds like onion seeds don't last more than around 1 year. And so if you're going to be growing onions from seed, you may as well just use the whole seed packet and not even try and store them. But otherwise, you just want to make sure that they are dry and in a cool, dark place. All right, the next question is, what if my seeds don't germinate? So if your seeds don't germinate, there's a couple different things that could be happening. One is that the seeds are old, such as onions. If you're on year 2 or 3 of your onion seeds, they're not germinating because the seeds aren't viable anymore. Number 2, it could be that you haven't waited long enough. So some seeds could take anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks to germinate. So if you are looking too soon for that time, it could be that, which is why it's important that the seed packet tells you how long until the germination time is, so you can plan for that. The third is that you planted your seeds too shallow or too deep, which means that it didn't have enough energy for it to grow out of the soil if you planted it too deep, or if you planted it on top of the soil and they prefer darkness to germinate, then it just means that the atmosphere that they're growing in isn't right for germination and you'll need to bury them. So it all really depends on the type of seeds and what they're looking for. And another issue could be that if your soil is way too wet, your seeds could have rotted in the soil and they're never going to grow. So you just want to make sure that you're keeping your soil at a nice moisture level where it's not too dry and not too wet, which brings me to the last thing. If your soil is too dry, your seeds aren't going to germinate either. So you just want to keep a very even moisture level on your seed starting soil. Okay, the next question is, should I start seeds indoors or direct sow them outside? So this is a depends. It depends on where you grow and what you're growing. There are some seeds that just do way better being direct sown, and that includes fava beans. I do better with nasturtiums being direct sown. Root vegetables are definitely better being direct sown, so carrots, beets, radishes, any of those that grow in the soil just do better being direct sown. But if you have a really long growing season, then you can direct sow a lot of stuff or in a greenhouse. But here in Canada, we need to start a lot of things indoors, especially the heat-loving plants like tomatoes, eggplants, and peppers. Those you definitely have to start indoors, but beans, lettuce, and even zucchini can all be direct sown. Cucumbers can be direct sown. So it really just depends on the length of your growing season, how eager you are to start inside, and how much space you really have to grow inside. So the next question is, what's the difference between heirloom, hybrid, and GMO seeds? So I'm going to start with with GMO seeds. And so GMO seeds are genetically modified seeds. And although all of these seed packets say non-GMO, you cannot have GMO seeds sold to you as a home gardener. So all of the seeds that you're buying from a retail store, these are all non-GMO seeds. And it's because companies have genetically modified these seeds to have very specific characteristics. And so they've patented those seeds and they own them. So Monsanto, now owned by Bayer, they already own a lot of seeds. And so only farmers have access to those seeds, and then they have to continue to buy those seeds. And it's usually because they have a resistance to glyphosate or Roundup. And that is why they're buying those GMO seeds. But you as a home gardener, you do not have access to GMO seeds, so you don't need to worry about that. So GMO sounds a little similar to hybrid, but hybrid is where you're taking two mature plants and you're pollinating one into the other to create a new plant. So the reason that they do this is to take the benefits, the good parts of two plants, bring them together so that way this plant has only the good things and not the bad things. So for example, you might have a squash that is resistant to the squash vine borer, but it gets powdery mildew. So the good part is it's resistant to the pest, but it gets powdery mildew. And then you have another plant that is very resistant to powdery mildew. And so you take those two squash and you hybridize them together in order to get a resistance to the squash vine borer and powdery mildew. But the thing is that it's very unstable. And so for that first year, it's called F1 because it's that first year of this hybridization. But if you go to save seeds from that F1, it will likely revert back to one of its plant parents and not the hybrid seeds that you bought. So you might get the one that is susceptible to powdery mildew, or you might get the one that isn't. Okay, and so the last one was, what is heirloom seeds? And so heirloom seeds are seeds that have been passed down by families or generations and that they have a documented history following them. And so for example, if you have an heirloom tomato, it will say this heirloom tomato came from such and such family in 1865 out of Poland, or something along those lines. There's a family history or a story behind it. Those are heirloom seeds. All right, the next question is, how do I know if my seeds are still good to plant? Well, there's two things for this. The first one is you can throw them in soil and see what happens. That's my choice of going around it. I don't put too much effort into it, but if you are worried about your timing and you want to know in advance if you have to buy seeds or you're ordering them online instead of buying them in store, you can do a germination test. And so oftentimes that means putting your seeds into a wet paper towel inside a sandwich container, and if they like heat, you'll want to put it on some kind of heat mat. If you're using a glass container, you can put it on a heat register if you don't have a heat mat, and then you just want to see how many seeds are going to sprout inside of the paper towel. Or there are other tests where you can drop seeds into a cup of water and see if which ones are floating and which ones are sinking. That's another way to tell your germination. And so there's just different ways to do tests depending on the type of seed that you're trying to get a germination test on. So you'll just want to do a quick Google of, say for example, how to do a germination test on my squash seeds. All right, the next question is, what do I do if my seedlings are leggy or weak? So leggy seedlings are when you don't have the right amount of light on your seedlings. They stretch really, really long and tend to tip over as they're searching for light from a window if your seed lights aren't on. And so if you have leggy seedlings, they can be fixed, but what you want to do is put them under direct light right away. And so for certain plants, like the nightshade family, so tomatoes, eggplants, and peppers, when you pot them up, you can just pot them up deeper so that way you get rid of that legginess and they can start off strong again. But if you're growing a squash and it came out and it's this long, it might be a little too weak for it, so you might want to start some new seeds. But by moving the light really close to your plants or getting a grow light to begin with, you might be able to salvage them. But if their stems are really weak and wobbly and they're not going to survive outside in the wind and all of the natural elements, your best thing you could do is scrap them and start new seeds. All right, the next question is, can I save seeds from my own plants for next year? Maybe. So if you are growing hybrid plants, no, you cannot, unless you're okay with a Russian roulette of what type of plant you're going to get. Flowers are the easiest that you can save seeds from, and so I recommend, if you're new to saving seeds, to go with flowers. They're the first ones to really learn as a beginner. And you can save seeds from your other plants. You just have to understand the seed life cycle. Some plants only seed in their second year of growing. Other plants, you can, say for example, tomatoes, you can save seeds from those super, super easily. And I have a video on how to save seeds from tomatoes, so I'll link that below. Eggplants, you have to know how to do it, but a zucchini, for example, you can't just save seeds from the fruit. You have to let one of your fruit go to maturity where it turns huge and thick and orange. So you really just have to know the life cycle of your plant in order to save seeds from it. Or you might have to, for example, with broccoli, if you want to save seeds from a broccoli, you don't get to eat the broccoli head at all. So it really depends on your priorities, on if you want to eat the food or save the seeds, or if you can eat the food and save the seeds. So it's definitely a way bigger topic than what we can talk about right now. The next question is, how do I deal with pests or diseases when growing from seed? Okay, so if you're growing inside from seed, thankfully there's not a lot of pests or diseases that you have to worry about. The biggest pests are fungus gnats, and they don't do anything. They're kind of just really irritating. They fly around your house and get in your face. They're just annoying, but you can buy sticky traps for that. And aphids, for me, have been my biggest issue. My in-laws have had white flies on the inside of their plants, but I have found the biggest issue to be aphids. And these ones are horrible to control. You have to know you even have them. And then what I do is I take a piece of tape, like indoor tape, and put it with the sticky side out on my finger, and then I just clean off all of my small seedlings. And that is probably the worst experience I've had with pests indoors. And diseases, the most common one is damping off, and it's where you wake up and your plants have just died overnight and you don't know what happened. And this is from contaminated soil. And so it's really important that you buy new soil, make your own soil, like the one in my description, and don't reuse old soil from last year. Don't use old potting soil from outside. Don't bring in any soil from outside. Don't do any of that. Just use a new sterile soil, or at least if you are going to use old soil, make sure to sterilize it properly. I've never done it before, but there's different methods of using. I think some people have used peroxide, or you use boiling hot water, or you bake it. But I've also heard that baking the soil in your house makes your house smell terrible. So it's all really up to you, and if you want to put in the effort to sterilize old soil, or if you want to make your own new seed starting soil. But the more sterilized your soil is, the less chances that you're going to have pests or diseases. So the next question is, do I need special soil or containers for starting seeds? So I am going to put links below for this one. I have a video on how to make your own peat-free seed starting soil where I discuss seed starting soil in that video. And I also have a video on all of the equipment that you could use for growing from seed. And so I'm gonna link both of those below because they're a larger question to be answered. You don't need special tools and you can make your own soil. However, the better the tools are, the better your seedlings are gonna come out. If you grow in a windowsill, you are gonna get leggy seedlings, but we all have to start somewhere. And so I am going to leave those 2 videos in the link below, plus 2 website articles that I have as well. I'm gonna put both of those below so you can check those out to get a better answer to this question. Okay, so the last question is, what is the best way to water seeds? So for me, I make sure that my seeds are being planted in a wet potting soil. And as long as you leave a dome on them, the way that this one here has a dome on it, the soil isn't gonna dry out. But as soon as you remove that dome, that's when the soil is gonna dry out faster. And so I like to plant in these trays here because I water my plants from below. And so you wanna have a tray that doesn't have any holes in the bottom. And what I do is I take a jug like one of these and I fill it up, and then I pour this into the bottom of the tray to allow the soil to soak up water from below. And this means that if I have any excess water, I can just dump it out after to make sure that my soil isn't drowning. And I also don't like pouring from above because it can move the seeds around and shift them, and I don't want that to happen. But I will switch to watering from above once my seedlings get about this large because I want to make sure that their stems are strong enough so that way when there is a rainfall outside, the stems don't break. So I will switch to above watering later on in the seed starting process just to make sure that I'm having my plants be prepared for the elements that actually happen outside, because obviously it doesn't rain from below. So I want to make sure that my plants are as strong as possible. And that is all of it for the Q&A. I hope you found this really helpful. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and I'll put another video over here for you to check out. And otherwise, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thanks, bye.